Hey everyone. How's it going? So, yeah, for those of you who are new here, I'll explain what it's all about. For those who've been here, you already know the drill, right? So, what we have here is every single month we host a challenge with Onyx Data. And what we do is we have two different sessions. We have a session which is called the workshop, where we go through the data set, talk about the data visualization that might be used within it, maybe point out some interesting points that you should pay attention to, or what to do with the data set, and so forth. And of course, this session is meant also for you to ask questions. So if you got stuck on something, if you cannot figure out something, or just in general have some questions that you might want to get answers to, this is a perfect way on how to do this. Now, the second thing is, or the second webinar that we usually have in the series is the top five announcement. So for those of you who are already signed up for those, you know what it's going to be all about. But for those of you who are new, so the second webinar is the top five announcement, where we go through the top five reports. We give the personal feedback on it. We just talk about them and say, okay, what's good about them, what couldn't be improved, how could it be improved, and so forth. So it's a really great way for new users or new Power BI developers to just listen and kind of see what's the mindset behind how we're going through them, right? What are the things that we pay attention to? What are the things that we test out, and so forth? So join both of them. I highly recommend it. But, it's always up to you guys to figure out which one is more important. From my side, the real question should really be, it's you've had a little bit of time. So my question to you guys is, have you already started to work on the reports? How does it feel like? Do you like the data set? Do you think it's a little bit more complex than typically? Or, give me something. Just so we know, how are you feeling about these different types of data sets? Because what we try to do is we try to provide a variety of them, mainly because there's a different, let's say, group of audiences that we have here. There's going to be developers who are completely new to Power BI. So for them, every single step is an achievement, right? They're learning something new every single time. Whereas there's going to be also some of you who have been working with Power BI for a longer period of time. So you have been competing previously. So you already know the basics, but you're trying to enhance your skills. This is why we're trying to also always play around with different data sets. Some of them are more complex, some of them are very basic. But at the end of the day, trust me, every single one of them can be utilized by everyone, right? It's not that you have to use every single column, it's not that you have to go through everything. This is just the base that we provide you with. Okay, covered the initial parts. Quickly gonna say hello to some of the people that are here in the chat, or at least who I see in the chat, right? So Rigoberto, hey man, you're here. All things is good. So happy to see you here. Jessica, hi there. Mohammed, who else we have here? I could try to pronounce that name, but I'm kind of afraid that I might mispronounce it. THGNH? Tinch? Maybe? I'll try that. Crystal, hey Crystal, how you doing? Uh, Carlisle, Abderman. There we go. There's a bunch of you. So happy to see you. And yeah, I already saw in the chat. So yeah, one thing. If you see me looking at the side from time to time, it's not that I'm trying to ignore you or anything, right? I have a second monitor there. That's where I have all the logistical side of things. That's where I have the chat, the basically the internal parts of the webinar, right? So I'm just looking, making sure I have answered everything, I have covered everything that people are looking for. The one question that we had already in the chat a couple of times, I already noticed, is there going to be a recording? Yes, every single webinar is recorded. So if you have to already notice, somebody said that, for example, other conferences happening and so forth. So if you have to go somewhere else, it's fine. You can always watch the recording afterwards. Joining a live session has one benefit, of course. You have the chance to ask questions or provide some comments if you want to, right? Which is something you cannot do on a recording. On a recording, you just sit there, relax, and just go through what's available. So, but yeah, the recording is going to be available, and usually you receive it in your emails if you sign up for the webinar, like day or two after the webinar, once it's done on our side as well. But yeah, let's take a quick look at the data set, and let's talk about some of the things that I think you should pay attention to when working with this data set, and maybe some of the visuals that you might choose to work with this particular data set. So there we go. All right, so most important thing, before we move on is gotta make sure that I share something, right? I mean, the agenda slide is great, so thanks for the team, but kind of hard to talk about the data set without showing the data set. All right, so one more thing before we move on to the data set. So for those of you who are new, once you sign up to the challenge, remember there are two parts of it. There's the Onyx the data challenge itself, and there's also our mini challenge. For the mini challenge, there's one additional thing that we do from our side is if you register to our website, you can sign up to, for example, I'll register right now. And there's another thing that you can do here. That is you can get so-called developer's license. So the developer's license is a mechanism where we basically provide you with a completely new Microsoft account, which has all the necessary licenses so you can utilize all of our visuals for free. Right? Sure, there are constraints, meaning that you cannot republish them, start to use them commercially, and so forth. But in a constraint of a challenge, you are completely free to use those visuals and create the best reports that are possibly out there. Right. One other thing is if you had already previously signed up for the developer's license, but you just forgot about it, you're going to see here it says that there's a password. Right. I can even uncover it. There's no use of it for anyways. This is the primary password for the first time when you log in. When you log in for the first time, you're going to be prompted to change this password. So this password is only for the initial sign in. Afterwards, it's going to be the password that you chose, and it's not going to be visible here. This is only the primary password. So make sure you remember the password that you changed to. If, of course, you are in a point where I just forgot, right? I know I changed it, but I cannot figure out what it was. You can always reach out to our team. There's an email, webinars@zoomcharts.com, where you can send in the inquiry, and we can reset the password from the admin side, and then you can create a new one. So if you are in that point, don't hesitate to just reach out, right? The main thing about all this environment, the challenges and everything is communication. If you get stuck on something, if you have any questions, if you have any general feedback, reach out. Okay? So yeah, developer's account and the password. Um, Submit report here. And of course, on the challenge page, there are a few more things I want to very quickly cover. You can read about the challenge. From our side, the main prize is $300 Amazon gift card. Pretty nice. I wouldn't say it's too bad, right? Right? It's pretty good. How to participate, of course. There's an instructional video. You can also just read and understand how it's necessary. The brief, I think it's one of the most important parts of it. The brief kind of gives you an understanding of what the data set is all about. And the one thing that I'm always saying here is remember, the brief is there to help you, not to give you specific steps that you have to follow. What I mean by this, the brief is there just to give you ideas on how you could analyze the data set. It doesn't mean that this is exactly what you need to go through. It doesn't mean this is exactly what you need to showcase. You can deviate from this if you want to. We provide you with the base data set. We give you ideas on what you can analyze, but it's completely up to you to choose whether you want to follow this route or you want to analyze something from a different dimension. You can also enhance these data sets by adding additional columns. You can also remove unnecessary columns and so forth. So you are more than welcome to work and play around with these data sets. Okay? And then, of course, something I highly recommend to take a look into is the judging criteria to understand what are the things that we are looking at. So you have some sort of an idea of, okay, this is something that they're probably going to take into account. This is something they're going to be looking for. And the one thing that I would highly recommend to the participants is don't forget that what we do from our side for every single submission is we provide you with a feedback. So once you submit that report, what we do on our side is we go through it, we play around with it, and we give you feedback on what should be improved or what is done very great and so forth, right? So just to give you that initial feedback. The reason why I'm telling this is because I mean, at the end of the day, you probably can understand we're all also human. So if you all submit your reports on the very last day, in the very last few hours, it's just humanly impossible to cover all of them, right? As much as I would love to say that we have hundreds of employees doing this, we don't. That's one thing. And the other thing is, the sooner you do it, or at least give yourself, a day or two in between, you leave yourself time to actually do something with these comments. So you can improve your report and you can resubmit it. You're not limited to only one version of the report. Well, you are in the sense that there's only one submission, but you can resubmit it infinite amount of times. So you can keep working on it, keep improving it, and then submit the final version, and that's the one that's going to go into the evaluation. Everything prior to that is your work in progress, right? So just take that into account. Now, once we go and take the data set itself, there's going to be few things in the zip file. So what you're going to get is the zip file. And within the zip file, don't do this, come with me. There we go. So within the zip file, you're going to have few things. You're not going to have this one. This is something I started to work. That's the sample file. But what you're going to have is the cheat sheet. You're going to have also the challenge brief, the Excel itself, the README for the participation, and so forth. The cheat sheet is basically for those of you who haven't used ZoomCharts before. It's a very quick kind of insight on what native visuals can be replaced with one of ZoomCharts visuals. So, for example, things like areas, columns, clusters, lollipops, and these sort of things can all be replicated with a combo chart. So you just have an idea of what to use there, right? Again, it doesn't mean you necessarily have to use all of them, but it's just something that guides you again. So that's one thing. The brief, it's the same thing as almost as in the website. The Excel file is here as the data source. Now, the way and how you work with the data source is up to you. In some cases, what we recommend or we see is that a lot of people actually do the transformation on Excel side, and then they import already a constructed version of the data source or the data file. Or there's the other part of things where people do all the transformations and everything on Power BI. How you want to do it, again, is completely up to you. From my personal recommendation is if you are new to Power BI and you're just starting to trying to understand how to do these things, how to better structure, is I would recommend you to start off with grouping the Excel file. What I mean by this, you can see we have a lot of different information, for example, a lot of different columns. The one thing that you're going to read all across the internet is going to be that it's very important to create a good data model. What good data model means is you don't just have one flat table as you have here, right? It's not a massive table with a lot of rows, with a lot of columns. A good data model is basically a star schema where you have facts and then you have different dimensions explaining the fact. So here you can see, for example, client ID is the one unique identifier for each entry. Then for each of the clients, we have additional information like person's age, income, ownership, employment length, and so on and so forth. So all of this could be part of one dimension. Then we have information regarding the loan itself. Then we have information regarding, again, the person, the gender, the marital status, the education level, and so forth. Then we have some information about the geography, the country, the state, the city, and so forth. So, first thing that I usually recommend is just group this information so you understand what sort of views you have available, right? Because the one thing you have to remember is unless it's specified specifically, you don't have to use all of it. If you're not going to be using part of it in your report or in your data analysis, get rid of it. There's no reason for you to make Power BI reports heavy with a lot of different additional information which you're just not utilizing, right? So this is what I usually did as well. I just grouped the information to understand, okay, how many different dimensions I have, what can I work with, what does it do, what does it explain, and that's why you also have this data dictionary, which explains what the information is within those columns. You can also use this for grouping. If you don't like grouping through here, you can also group the dictionary and then transpose that into the actual data set, right? So play around with those. Don't be afraid. Remember, this is an Excel file. Even if you mess something up, worst case scenario, just download a new file. It's the magic of the internet. Start fresh. Yeah, don't worry about it. Mistakes happen. Just main thing is learn from them. But yeah, you have the Excel file, and then the second half, what I said is you can work with the Excel file, or what I see a lot happening as well is people work with the transformation and everything within Power BI, within Power Query. And how you do this is again dependent on how you feel comfortable with. There are some benefits to each of those, and there are also some flaws with each of those, right? So for now, do what feels comfortable. Once you are comfortable with it, in the sense that you already kind of know what the flow is and everything, then you can start to learn the other half, which would be Power Query and how to do this all within Power BI. The reason why it's sometimes better to learn it at the end on how to do it within Power BI is because a lot of those transformations is part of automation. So you don't have to do this every single time the new Excel file comes in. You just plug it into the Power BI file and you have those transformations already ready as a step. So just convert everything and work on a new report and just get the new data. Now, as far as the report itself goes, we have, like I said, a couple of different dimensions: the persona itself, the loan information, the geographical information. What I do here is what I usually say is, right, do not copy paste it, because when I'm creating sample reports, I'm not as much thinking about the very best practices of data modeling. What I'm doing is thinking about what can be showcased and how it can be showcased. So one other quick thing that I would recommend if you're learning Power, and not even learning, this is actually something I usually recommend to do anyways, is in Power Query, when you're qualifying your data and doing the transformations, there are a few things that you can. Why are you running away from? Oh, okay, never mind. One thing that can happen is if you have automatic connection to the OneDrive, if you have Excel open, it's going to give you errors. So by closing it, now it's showing. So the one thing that you can do here is getting rid of the data as well. Like I said, get rid of anything that's not going to be useful. But there are a few things that usually I recommend, and that's the column profile and column quality. These two check marks under the View tab. The reason why I recommend them is whenever you're doing the very first look at the data set, you don't really know exactly what's within it. So what these two allow you to do, the quality is this little part up here. Just quickly showcases you whether the data is valid, whether it gives you an error, or if there's empty columns. Not even columns, but for example, in some cases you might have columns which have like a one or zero, but then zero is not really there; it's just blank. So would give you like 50%, for example, empty values. 50%, okay, I can keep it. If it's like 99% empty values, is it something really that you need within a data set, right? It's sort of a quick informational overlay in that sense. And the column profile is something I usually do for columns to help me understand, okay, how many unique values do I have within it? It's basically like looking at a very simplified version of a report, right? Okay, there are four different ownership types of homes. Employment length. Okay, we can probably see this is an error in data entry. As much as I would love to believe this, but I'm pretty sure that if you look at the data dictionary, employee employment rate is in years. So if somebody has been working for 123 years, I mean, kudos to him, but probably not going to happen. So this is one of those things that I would probably do. Just play around with the values and see, okay, there's some sort of separation there. Okay, these sort of values, how many unique values I have there, what's the min max for numbers and so forth. I do this usually even before I go into the report itself, right? I just go through the data so I can kind of create a map for myself, what's available, what could I be looking into, and so forth. So that's what I usually do from my side as well. And this is at the time where I would always so make sure that all the data has been qualified properly. So for example, here you can see that it's a whole number, loan amount. I could keep it as a whole. I could also convert it straight away to be a fixed decimal number, which means that it would add a currency symbol to it automatically based on the regional settings. You can also do this on Power BI desktop side, but you can also do this in Power Query. So that's one part of things. Now, once we've done that, once we kind of separated, deleted everything that we not need, is we can start to work on the report. Now, what I did this time is I didn't follow any of the paths that were described here. What I wanted to do is I wanted to quickly, first of all, create a page that allows me to overview what we have currently in the loan department, how many loans we have issued, how many of those have defaulted, what's the recovery amount, how much we're potentially losing, and so forth, right? So, because whenever a loan is defaulted, there's always a chance that some of the money is not going to be recovered. we might have recovered most of it. We might kind of recovered only a 10% portion of it, basically, right? So that's something that I wanted to play around with as well. So we started off just with the KPIs, the total amount of loans, the total exposure, how much have we loaned out, what's the average interest rate, how many defaulted, what's the amount for defaulted loans. And this is the part where I started to play around with, right? What's the recovery amount and loss potential? So the recovery amount and loss potential is essentially dependent on what we consider is going to be the percentage of how much we have recovered. Now, this can be done in two different ways. You can hard code a value. So, for example, let's say you assume that 60% of all the defaulted loans are still going to be able to be recovered, whether through collections or other means, but you get back 60%, and you hard code this. Then you would have to somehow make sure that, for example, recovery amount, you give an information button or something like that to explain that this is with the assumption that we recover 60% of the exposure. Alternatively, you can do something also similar to what I did here. What I did is I created a recovery rate slider. And this is basically just to allow the user to choose how much we're actually recovering. So this is the total amount that we have issued to the defaulted loans. Um, just by quick Google, I found out that average rate, or the assumption is that we recover about 45% of the loan. So we could keep that as a default value, but the user has the ability to say, hey, we can recover 71% of everything. And that's going to give me the adjustments in the numbers and say, hey, we issued out 77 million, about 54 million is going to be recovered, but we're going to be taking a loss of 22 mil. So this is something you allow them to play around with. Now, once I had this, I was starting to think, okay, which means that recovery rate, sure. So how I did the recovery rate? If you go to modeling, you can go to new parameter, numerical range. I called it recovery rate. You can see it right here. I'm just gonna call it rec rate for now, so just so it creates something new. The data type is going to be a decimal number since I'm going to be working with percentages. Minimum is going to be 0, maximum is going to be 1 because it's a binary decimal value. Increments of 0.01, so 1% increments. You could also go with something like 0.1, meaning an increment of 10% all the time. It's completely up to you. And then, of course, there's some sort of a default value. Like I said, in my case, let's put it at 45%. So what this is going to do is it's going to create a new table right here. It gives you the rec rate and the value. This is the slider for it. You can see nothing happens right now because it's not associated with anything. We can also see it's a decimal number, which is not something I want. So I got to make sure that I adjust this into percentage. Makes more sense. Since I'm not going to be able to adjust part of the percentage, like additional decimal numbers, I can easily also say that there's not going to be any decimals. There's no reason to showcase anything that is not important, right? So just remove those decimals, 60% in whole number percentages, but the increment is 10%. I give this to the users and they come back to me and be like, it's good, but we usually go in increments of 5%. Well, it's a great thing that this was done with a formula. So I can just go ahead here, generate series, and this is all the same module that you had there. This is just a DAX formula for it. So this is the starting value, the maximum, and the increment. So if the increment is going to be 5%, I'm just going to say it's going to be 0.05%. Apply the changes, and now the user can move the slider with increments of 5% or 1%, whatever it is. It's completely up to you to just play around with these. Now, once you have this slider, you have to create a dynamic value. In order to create a dynamic value, I'm creating another measure. So for the measure, let's say I'm going to create exposure at default times the recovery rate. Recovery amount, let's call it test. I'm just going to say it's going to be recovery. Sorry, not recovery. My mistake. exposure at default times recovery rate. No, rec rate, I called it. Gotta make sure it's the right one, all right? Otherwise, I'm gonna look like a fool. So rec rate value, this is the value from the slider basically. And then I can go ahead, put it next to the exposure. So this is this number, just to check. We can say, usually I try to find some sort of a middle point, right? Where it's easy to understand whether it is a half or not, or you put it at 100% if it's allowed. In my case, it wasn't. So 95%, or that's the lowest, zero. Zero seems to be working. 10% usually is easy to kind of compare, seems to be working. So this allows the user to kind of play around with this. Loss potential was calculated as exposure to default minus recovery amount. So it's just a matter of playing around with what's available to you and how to interpret it and put it within the visual, right? Different parameters, switches, field parameters is something that I definitely recommend to learn. You don't necessarily have to always do it and have it. I have a field parameter here as well, for example. I'm going to show it how it's done as well. But you don't always have to do all of this, right? Sometimes less is more. Trust me, we've had submissions also where we look into them and they look good on a surface level. But when you are going into the details of how it's being calculated, it's done in a very complex manner, right? And the reason why this is starting to become noticeable is because if you do things in a very complex manner, usually it starts to impact also the performance. So the visuals start to become a lot heavier, they're a lot slower, non-responsive, or not as responsive as you would want to. So it's a fine line between choosing how much you can do and how the report feels to the end user. Because I've had both cases. I've had cases where we've done a very detailed report and the user understood the consequences and they were okay with the slower performance. And I've also had cases where we have also done that, but the main issue with the report is from the end user perspective is it feels clunky, right? So then you start to rework and make things simplified. It's not as detailed as it was, but they were after the experience. So we just switch things around and kind of try to attend that. Um, yeah, that's one thing. So since we had the exposure at default. What I also wanted to do is I wanted to be able to kind of split between them or choose what I want to focus on. Whether I want to focus on all the loans that I have provided, or well, not me. I would love to have that amount of money, but not there yet, guys. Not there. So whether all the loans that I have issued or the ones that have defaulted. The reason why I want to kind of separate between them is because it allows me to focus whether on the whole portfolio or the trouble cases. Let's call it like that, right? So what I did here is I created a field parameter. The field parameter is basically a principle that allows you to switch between different values. And the way I did it is since I'm changing the value, so in my case, for example, if I switch between them, you can see these numbers on the y-axis change. This completely rescales, kind of everything rescales, right? So whether all or just the defaulted ones. In order for that to work properly, and since it is a value, there's one important thing with field parameters, and that is that numerical field parameters need to be a measure. Otherwise, it's not going to work properly. So the way I did it is modeling, new parameter, fields. You can call it whatever you want. And in my case, I just had these two measures. I added them in, pressed create. I can quickly recreate it. That's going to give me a slicer. I can actually make this smaller so I have room to play with. So I have this slicer by default. I don't really want the user to be able to, for example, select both of them. Makes no sense. I also don't want them to be starting off or have a situation where none of them are selected. Also seems weird. So what you do is go into the formatting options, slicer settings, selection, and force a single selection. There is no way for the user to unselect everything or to select all of them. Just a single selection will suffice. Cool. Well, you can see also design wise, we could have it basically as a radio button, or we can have it as tiles. The tiles are set through the styles. Here, you just switch to tile. And the tiles basically always try to adapt to available room. So more horizontal space, gonna have side by side. More vertical space, gonna have one on top of the other. Try not to create something like this though. Buttons that go to the sides, or if everything is not visible or very hard to read, try to avoid those scenarios. Ideally, I would probably do something like this as well in my case. I would try to have the text as a single row rather than one splitting in two rows, one having one row, just from a visual perspective, right? So that's one thing. Then I wanted to be able to split all the loans based on the terms. So in my case, in the data set, we all have the same data set. So 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, or 5 years. Those are different terms that are available. The reason for that is afterwards to kind of see the actual underlying portfolio. For the cards, I noticed this, and this is something that's triggering me personally. Try to avoid always any sort of cut off versions of the numbers. If you see that something doesn't fit in the cards, you have to fix it. So in my case, call out values, I could do it for all. Let's put it at something like 32, and maybe a little bit too small. Not fitting in, doesn't work. So 36 seems to be working. Remember, if you find a situation where something doesn't fit in or isn't fully visible, you have the power to adjust it. Don't be afraid to do it. Because the first impression that you give to your users, if they're going to see like a cutoff version of the number, even though you spend hours upon hours on the report, the first impression is that's kind of sloppy. You didn't pay attention even to the default view. Come on, what can I expect from the rest of the report? And that's the reason why all these little details matter. So if anything, play around with the report. This is something I usually recommend as well. Just play around. Select something here, select switch to exposure, increase these percentages, even just random actions. Just switch around the numbers, see what's going to happen there. Okay, seems to be working just fine. But if somebody comes across a situation where suddenly things just look weird, well, I have to do something about this. Another thing that I remember, is, for example, for the cards, um, if I go for call out values and, for example, number of loans, this one, by default, I think it's sitting on auto. Yeah, it's going to be on auto. So just having 6K, I don't know, it didn't feel right for me, mainly because there's 999 variations of 6K. Well, probably like 499 because it's 6.5. It should round up, but you never know. But there's a lot of loans missing essentially. So for those cases where you don't have massive numbers, where you just want to be specific or showcase those details, remember you have the options to switch, just for example, version of the display unit for a single card if it's needed. In my case, number of loans, and I want to make sure that there's no display units. So there's no thousands, millions, or anything. I just want to see the whole number. What it ensures me is that even if I go to hundreds or thousands, I know exactly how many there are. In some cases, it's not going to be necessary. In some cases, it's going to be very important. Same here. For example, average loan in interest percent. We could have the two decimals, but if we see that the decimal part wouldn't be that important, we can remove it. In this case, there might be a pretty decent difference between, for example, 0.5% or a percent. So I keep all of it there. As far as the visuals, what I did is I also wanted to be able to see the loans based on sort of the brackets or the bins or sizes of the loans. I could, of course, just go ahead and be like loan amount and try to kind of categorize this. But this just seems ridiculous, right? There's too many categories, doesn't really tell you anything, so kind of useless. So a very simple way on how to do this is if you have a numerical or even textual, you can do this for both, but just in different ways. For this case, loan amount, right click, oh, new group. Don't know why it's not a full size, don't ask me. But I'm going to be working with bins. And there are two ways on how you can work with bins, either with the size of the bin or the number of bins. In my case, I chose size of the bin, and I said that one bin is going to be 5,000. So essentially what this means is this is 0 up until 4,999. This is starting from 5,000 up to 9,999. This is starting. So increments of 5K, basically. So create OK, and that's going to create a new bin, new column that you can afterwards utilize in the visual. You can also go into smaller segments if you want to. So for example, we started this with 5K increments. I can also create a new group, size of bins, create a new one with increments of 1,000, size of bin 1,000. We can see loan amount bins 2. If I click on it now, there's nothing because there's no drill down, but I have now everything split into thousands. I can click on that and see smaller increments. So even if you don't have the data, you can always play around with and kind of get more insights into it. It all just depends on the level of granularity that you're looking for. So this is what I did for this chart. And what I also did is, as much as I would love to think that everybody always remembers what they selected here, whether looking at the whole exposure or just a portion of it, I also played around with an idea of, okay, what if I would enable the legends and the legend item itself, if there's no legend column, what I mean by this is if you're not using this field, the legend is going to be the series, the value. So in my case, whenever you switch between them, you can see it also changes the name. So even though somebody forgets what they selected or they get confused which one is selected and which was is unselected, this tells them what is currently visible. You can also do this through the titles. You can see exposure or exposure at default. So there are different ways in how to play around with this. I just wanted to play around with them. It's interesting to kind of see what else is out there and how to approach this. But yeah, that's what I did there. So that's based on different sizes of the bins of the loan amounts to see which ones maybe are defaulting more, which ones are defaulting less, and so forth. Then I went with two different donut charts because we have a lot of data data columns that essentially are like qualifying columns. Like for example, a gender, whether or not they have defaulted previously, and so forth. So I can say that okay, for people who have defaulted previously and who are in a bracket of 15 to 20K, who for whom the loan term was 3 years, what's the current situation? We can see that for the portfolio that we have issued 265 loans based on those results, and 117 of them have already defaulted. Worst case scenario or best case scenario, if we assume that we only recollect 45%, means that we're only collecting 852K, and we're taking a loss of a million. So this is kind of the approach that I took here. So because we have a lot of this qualification, basically, I think the donut chart is very good. I think combo chart could work, or a combo bar chart, just to kind of see what's out there. As much as I would love to try to squeeze 3 donuts here, right? I could try to do it, but you can see it's very hard to read. It kind of gets very close to the edges. So an alternative is, for example, something like a combo bar. So creating something like this. And we did have actually a lot of questions, or multiple times we had a similar question of whether we can recreate a lollipop chart with the combo or combo bar chart. I can say, yeah, we can do it, and it's pretty simple. So the way you do it is if I create a new page, and this is going to be the same for a combo or a combo bar. The only difference is going to be one's going to be vertical, one's going to be horizontal. For the category, I'm gonna take what we had here. We can go for anything. Let's go for something like education level. For the values, I'm gonna take the same exposure. It doesn't really matter what it is. For example, create something like this. And then what you want to do is you want to add the same value once again. The reason for this is because I'm going to be mixing two different series types to achieve an effect of a lollipop. It's not just a straightforward process where you switch between them, but you can recreate it. That's the beauty of our visuals. There's a lot of customization in them. So what I'm going to do is formatting options. I'm going to be using series 2 and convert it into a line. The reason why I want to do this is because I don't want to have two columns side by side, but I somehow want to get that lollipop effect, right? So I'm going to make a line. And for lines, you all know you have markers. You can also increase the size of the marker just to kind of, make it fit a little bit better if it's needed to. But then, of course, you have this line itself. I could try to use a stepped outline, for example, to kind of hide it, but it also looks weird. So what you can do actually is just simply change the outline width to 0. And this basically gives you just the markers. Line is still there, it's just not visible. Okay? Still doesn't look like a lollipop. So the other thing that I have to do is for series 1, which is the yellow column, height percent in this case. In combo, it's going to be width percent. So just based on the orientation. I'm going to say that this is going to be like 10%. Kind of close to the marker, so let's go ahead and say this is going to be 5%. There you go, lollipop chart. You can also do this as a bullet, basically. What I mean by this is, let's say we have education level, we have the exposure, and the marker is not going to be the same value, but I want to see where the value is based on default. So how much of the whole thing we have or we are potentially losing. Right? So suddenly it's a bullet chart. Now, this is one of those things where you can play around with these values. You just have to kind of be creative around it. There's a lot of things that you can achieve with these visuals, which may not seem straightforward initially, but the more you play around with it, the more you understand the basic concept of it, the more you see it's capable of. There is a reason why we're saying that these visuals are basically a replacement for hundreds of variations of charts. You have columns, lines, areas. You have 25 different series. Each of those can be customized as an individual. You can also customize them as a group. You can mix both of those experiences. So there's a lot of things you can do here. If you want to learn more about the visual setup and just how to do things, another material that you can use is there's also, of course, documentation. We do have it. I'm pretty sure most of you are not amazing fans of reading documentations. I know I do it because I have to, and I write it because I have to, but I'm not a big fan of it. I much rather look at a video, which is why you can also go to video tutorials, and it's the Academy. The Academy is basically a free resource that you can utilize to see, for example, okay, donut or combo and combo bar. What can we do here? Initial setup, interactions, legends, categorical access, threshold, stacking. You can learn about these principles from these videos. Very good experience. So yeah, there's the Academy. You can also look at the visual gallery. You can look at some of the examples that have been previously created by somebody else. Um, you can also look at the previous challenges if you want to. I don't know. Let's say same approach. If we go here, there's one specific one that I wanted to quickly find. For example, something like this. With the customization, you can also do something like this. For example, there's conditional formatting and there's different settings for the columns. So one is basically a transparent box, and the other one is used as a fill color. But those are just two different series. You can see from the legends that budget is the box. I can remove it if I want to. And the total sales is the actual fill for it. So I could also just disable, for example, the actual results and look at the budget if I want to, if this seems like too much at some point. Or vice versa. I don't care about the budget. I just want to look at the actuals and have the color as a representation of whether I met the target or not. I don't care about how much have we exceeded the target? I just want to see if we have met it or not. So there's different things that you can definitely look into. And yeah, the reason why I showed you this is because every single one of these reports, you can just download the PBIX file and see how things have been set up. So utilize all the materials that are available to you. What else? Yeah, quick lollipop chart. Blah, blah, blah. What else we can do here is if I, for example, create a lollipop chart, I can play around with conditional formatting for the markers. That's something that we allow you to do. So for series 2, I can say that, hey, I actually want to conditionally format it. And since I don't have a line, I could also just remove it and have it just for the markers. But since I just have the markers, I can say that, hey, the principle of the conditional formatting is going to be this series, for example, and a very basic concept of max, right? So just find everything that's in max. Or if it's above, above minimum, in this case, doesn't really make a lot of sense. Above the average or something like that, a percentile, and you define what's going to be the upper percentile. So for example, I don't know, 90%. So only this falls into that category. So different things, different approaches, different results. The most important thing is just don't be afraid to play with these. The reason why is because this is a challenge environment. You're not going to lose anything even if you do a mistake or do not get to the result that you were looking for. You can always reach out to us and tell us what you were trying to do. We're going to try to help you out. But at the end of the day, this is just something that allows you to see what's out there, right? But yeah, so play around with those. Like I said, if you also want to see what other members have done in previous challenges, you can open up the challenge section, scroll down. For example, the previous month's August Onyx Data challenge, open it up. You can see the winner report, and you can also see all the other submissions. Every single one of these, find something interesting, download the PBIX. Cannot, perfect. Just noticed Basim's comment, and Basim, congratulations again. So yeah, if you see something interesting, one thing that you can do is you can download the PBIX and see how it was done. The other thing is, worst case scenario, just reach out to the author. That's why we ask for your LinkedIn, so other people can reach out to you. Worst thing that can happen is, for whatever reason, the person might not reply to you, which basically leaves you at exactly the same position as you were before you wrote that message, right? Don't be afraid to ask for help, to ask for guidance or anything. If it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. So you can basically keep on doing what you were doing before. But a lot of the time, people are going to be very kind of supportive and come back to you with, maybe they don't have time to fully explain you how they did it, but they can give you um, ideas or give you the necessary, for example, reference to a video, to a blog post where they got the idea, anything. So it's part of networking. It's part of creating relationships, asking for advice, and so forth. And also, Power BI community is great for that. There's Discord channels, and there's a bunch of different ways on how to communicate with others. But yeah, lollipop chart, we can do it. Candlesticks, box and whiskers, we can also do all of those things. So that's what I did here. And for the scatter plot, what I did is I just went with the average interest rate and with the average person income. So I just wanted to see, for example, if there are any specific outliers. So for example, if we go into USA, we can see that the highest percentage interest rate is going to be actually for medical loans, and the average income is going to be between 62 and 64K. I could investigate it further by adding an additional layer as an additional drill down. The one thing is just remember to not make it too granular, because we have, I think in total, let's make it even less so I don't completely overkill the visual. Just want to make sure to, have a decent experience. Categories, client ID. So now if I go to Canada, we can see the highest interest rate is going to be venture. Then I see all the individual customers. I can zoom in, I can investigate a bit more. I can also add additional information in the tooltip, like for example, what's the education level for this customer, what's the intent for the loan, and so forth. So it all depends on how you're going to be creating your story. In my case, the main idea is I just wanted to see which countries have the highest interest, average interest, not the one highest point, and also what are going to be the intentions. So what is going to be used for? That's the main thing. Um, just want to make sure that we also cover. There was a okay. We have a question. Let's see how exposure is called. In this case, the exposure is quite simple. I call it exposure because that's what we essentially have given, and we don't know what's going to happen with it necessarily. We hope to get it back, but we don't know. Exposure is just the sum of loan amount. The defaulted exposure, so pretty simple. You figured out who has defaulted. We actually have a flag for it. So it's just a calculate. Loan status 1 means it's defaulted. Anything else? If there are no other questions, my question to you guys is, since I covered what I wanted to this session, there's probably hundreds of different things that I could still talk about, but how are you liking these sessions so far? I know there's a feedback form QR code in top right. If it's the same for you, for me, it's on the top right corner. So if you scan it, you can also fill in a submission form for the feedback and just tell us what you think about these sessions. What are you thinking they're useful? They're getting repetitive. There's nothing new to learn from these. What are you missing for anything? The more information you give to us, the better we can prepare the next session. If you don't, you know, give us that part of what's missing or what you think we should do with it, there's always that feeling that I think we're doing okay. We don't need to change anything. There is a suggestion. Perfect. What is the suggestion? On the screen. Oh, I think you will begin to demonstrate how to enable the legends for the scatter visual. It's a bit tricky. Yeah. So for the scatter plot, it might seem that, for example, right now we already have categories and we should be able to see some sort of a legend, but we currently don't have a legend item. What I mean by this, the categories are used initially to provide a context of groups. This isn't necessarily something that you use within a legend. So in order to have a legend, you would actually have to have it in the legend field. If I would just move it to the legend field, you can see now I have a legend that I can enable. So this could be a split version of that, right? But there is a tricky part to this. What a lot of people try to do, and this is just something that Power BI doesn't allow you to do. If you have a field that is being referenced in something that the visual uses to somehow, for example, split it, if I'm going to try to use it again in the legend, this is what you're going to get. The reason for it is because essentially you're trying to do the same thing for multiple things, and it doesn't allow you to do. There is, however, a very quick workaround for it. So if you want to use, for example, you want to have this view, but you also want to use the country as a splitter for the next layer. So for example, every single time I go into Canada, I want all the dots to be yellow. What you can do is, it's not necessarily a highly recommended approach, but hey, you can do this. Country legend, let's call it. And what I'm going to do is just basically reference the same country value. And because this is a completely different column, I can now use it in the legend. So now if I go under Canada, because all of it falls under Canada, everything's going to be in the same color. And vice versa. If you're not using this, like I said, you can just use the country, for example, like this and have it split down. You can disable or enable certain views or certain parts of it to kind of look deeper. What else is there? The labels is something that we are doing in a slightly different variation than what native visuals do. And that is that by default, it's going to be looking like this. You're just going to have dots. So if you drill down, again, just dots. Don't know what is what. So what we allow you to do is either you define a specific label driven by the dataset, or you can also go under data points default and right here use category as a label. The reason why this is important, I'll give you an example. I could use the label field. It's very good in those cases where you have specific labels that you want to showcase instead of the original part of the data. Let's say like that. But if I, let's say, use a country now, and you can see the label can only be used as a singular column. There cannot be multiple columns here. So if I do this and I go back to the initial view, seems fine. UK, USA, Canada, all good. Drill down. Suddenly everything is Canada because it's taking the value from the label field. If you want to overcome this, you can say that you're using categories as a label. So what it's doing is it's automatically going through these columns. So in cases where you want to control the labels specifically, you use the label field. In cases where you wanted to follow the data through the drill down levels, you use the categories. What also we have done here is, for example, let's say if I zoom out a bit more, or even here, you can see that this point doesn't, you can see if I hover over it's education, but it's not visible all the time. Reason for it is quite simple. Outside labels, or actually it was under here, um, we have disabled the overlap. You can enable or disable it. If you feel that, for example, at a certain point, these labels are too big or they don't really provide any more value, you can also play around with the detail min size and say that, hey, unless it's like 50 pixels, don't show me the labels. So what this means is if I zoom close in enough, you can see the labels appear. But if I'm far away, I don't see them. Reason why this can become very important is because I could do something like this, right? I could go into a country, I could go into a loan intent. Oh, too many things. There we go. A lot of different points. Now, if I would enable overlap on this and the detail size would be set at default like 10, I'm going to zoom in slightly. 10. There we go. Mwah, chef's kiss, right? Amazing. This is why overlap is disabled by default. So it's trying to kind of find, there's still not enough room. So I would say this is the time where you play around with the min size. But this is something you do as a developer. You have to play around with these cases. You have to find what works. So yeah, what about our visuals? Are they allowed? Sure, yeah. You can use our visuals as well. Anything that you can utilize within Power BI, you're more than welcome to use. The only thing is that if you want to participate in the mini challenge, the ZoomCharts mini challenge, there is a requirement to use at least two of our visuals. I think it was two of our visuals in a single page. Let's just double check. Judging criteria. Yeah, at least one page of the report must contain two of our visuals. But you can create, for example, an overview page where you're using our visuals, but then doing something completely different on the second page with the R visuals. More than welcome to do it. Always happy to share and demonstrate. That's what I do here. All right, that's going to be it from me this time. I hope it was interesting and did you manage to learn something new and actually useful? If not, then also let me know that in the feedback form so I can improve my skills for the next time. But yeah, if you haven't yet, then sign up for the top 5 webinar and I'll see you there. There's another one. Just to mention, can you demonstrate on how to use ZoomCharts map? A very quick demonstration since I don't want to keep people for too long. So for the map visual, there's two mandatory fields, and that is that you need a latitude and a longitude. Once you have that, the map is going to be displaying basic information. Then you can start to enhance it. So for example, based on a loan amount, I can add a value. Once you do this, the main thing that I would always recommend is play around with the settings. So for example, right now you can see the labels are white in my case from the theme file. So what I would do is probably node settings, or actually I can keep it inside. So inside labels, I'm gonna have a background which is gonna be rounded so that you can see those values. Make sure that it's visible in those cases. But this is one part of it. You can add additional layers on top of it. So for example, you can add a category which isn't going to do anything initially. It's going to be seeming like it. But if you afterwards go into node settings, scroll down, pie charts on nodes, you can enable that. And that's going to be a clustered view on how different regions or what intents are being utilized the most. And the cool thing about the map is the closer you get, the more split version of that information you're receiving. Just make sure that you play around with the colors, right? Because, for example, this is a prime example of what not to do. My primary color is that yellow one, but since the same colors are used for the donut slice colors, it kind of seems weird. So the center is going to be, for example, gray. So make sure there's no overlap or anything like that. All right. Well, thank you so much, guys, for your time and attention. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye, everyone.